Chris, if you could give a startup founder, any startup founder, one piece of advice, what do you think that would be?
Yeah, well, I work with a lot of startup founders. I mean, I am an angel investor. I wouldn't say I'm a super active angel investor. I'm part of TBD Angels, which is an angel group in the Boston area, and then I'm part of the venture mentoring group at Northeastern too. And I have a couple of mentees that I talk to about this sort of thing all the time. And it's really just demonstrate, pursue, and demonstrate commercial traction as early as possible. Everybody wants to, particularly the sort of engineering type product visionary founders. They want to retreat into the lab and focus on what they're building. You got to get out there and talk to customers, and you've got to get potential customers, and you've got to get some of them bought in. It's almost impossible to raise capital, at least as a first time founder, if you haven't done that. I mean, if you've been successful, if you've made money for investors previously, different story. But assuming this is your first go around, you got to get out there and talk to customers. So that's the biggest thing. And you got to be able to demonstrate some form of commercial traction, ideally paying customers, or at least customers who are committed to paying if once you can deliver what you might need some capital to fully deliver, or even trials. But get out there in the market as early as you can. It's probably the biggest point of advice I can give, because a surprising number of startups, they don't want to do that. That's not what they're thinking. And that's where they think, oh, I have to go hire a salesperson. But that's not necessarily the answer. It's, as we were kind of circling back, bringing us full circle to what we were saying before, it's really, the founders have to get out there and be parts of those conversations. So, because, it's really the only path to success these days. The days of I have an idea and VCs are going to throw money at me are long over, unless you're the kind of entrepreneur that's already, created exits and created value for those VCs. Then they might talk to you because they've seen you do it before. But if you're the first time in the seat, you got to get out there as early as you can and as often as you can.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll take the VC part of it out of the equation and say, if you're not consistently talking to to prospects and to clients, that's when you wind up building something that you think is cool, but that the market doesn't necessarily care about. And I know this because I did it.
Yeah. 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 Well, and also, by the way, I would say 1B as well when I'm talking to startup founders. And I do feel this is starting to change, but we still have a long way to go. And your background in services, you already alluded to it, but it's that realize there's alternative paths to the VC path. I mean,
Yes.
That's particularly as a, professor entrepreneurship and talking to students early in their careers. I'm trying to drive this point home all the time that, the venture game is a tough one, and it only fits certain types of companies. And there are a lot
Less
of
than 15%.
interesting, creative, viable businesses that, can and should be started, founded, grown, but they're not necessarily fit for venture. So realize there are all kinds of alternatives out there and all kinds of models. And again, I think that's becoming a little better understood in the market, but the VC path is not the only path, is something very important to keep in mind too. For some companies, it's the right path, but for a lot, it's really not. And if you try to go down that path and it's not a fit for your business, first of all, you're probably not going to make it. But even if you make it, you might wind up, down the road in a situation you're not happy to be in. So, or your investors. It's hard because, in the early days of the company, it's very hard to see the future fully, but you have to kind of recognize the potential scalability and whether it really fits the VC model, and to at least be thinking about that as you make these decisions as early as possible is really, really important.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll take it one step further and say, even if VC is your path, the further you can delay that without hurting your company, the more autonomy you're likely to retain and more equity you're likely to